Welcome back to another episode of the Higher Love with Megan podcast, talking all things holistic health and mind, body, soul healing and expansion, with me, your host, Megan Cooper. This episode is recorded with Emma Cully, a somatic practitioner, wellness consultant, and therapeutic yoga teacher. I experienced one of Emma's workshops at a day retreat and loved her approach of gently guiding us back into the body and the felt experience, and I was keen to find out more about her work. We have a tendency to think our way through life, but we have an entirely new layer available to us when we can feel our way through as well. On top of which, our stories and our perceptions about what is going on in the moment or in the broader spectrum of our lives can shift when we listen to the body's cues and make little steps to bring ourselves back towards equilibrium. Put into a therapeutic context with a specialized practitioner, working with the body alongside the mind can help to resolve trauma and its symptoms, since life doesn't just happen to the head, but to the body. In this episode, you'll understand how somatic work can be utilised alongside traditional therapies to expand our awareness, understand ourselves better, take deeper ownership of our experience, and help to process and heal trauma. Emma describes the functionality of the nervous system and of the fight or flight and freeze response and what happens in moments of trauma so that you can understand how trauma is a full bodily experience. Emma describes how she works with clients experiencing depression or anxiety and how somatic work can help us to know what is available to us and to develop safety, neutrality, and preference. Emma also provides ideas and tools for getting into our body and our felt experience, ones which you can do anywhere, anytime, in order to bring around greater connection, collaboration, and vitality within our lives. Enjoy. All right, my love. Well, I'm so pleased to have you here recording with me. I really enjoyed your workshop that I had the pleasure of attending a couple of months ago, and I've been wanting to have this conversation with you and to receive all of your wisdom ever since. So thank you for sharing this time and space with me.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to be here.
Wonderful. Okay, so why don't we begin by just explaining what it is that you do?
Okay, cool. So I'm a somatic practitioner. And ultimately, I work with people's nervous systems, the felt experience of their nervous system. So the colloquial term for this is the felt sense, and the sciencey word is interoception. And we're really focusing in on that felt experience of emotion and working to navigate that experience when it comes to dealing with things that are really tricky. So harnessing things like curiosity and a mindful attention is really, really important to navigating the felt sense, because we need a specific kind of attention to be able to get some space between the charge of what we're feeling and kind of action. Ultimately, working with the felt sense gives you a buffer. It gives you a moment to pause before you do something so that you can assess how you feel about it, assess what's true, assess what's going on in your body, and then make a decision based on all of the information, not just on what you think about what's happening, but how you feel. And this is important because your story, thoughts, etc., follows your state, follows your felt experience of where you are in your nervous system. So we're really working with the felt sense and harnessing that mindful attention so that you can kind of navigate challenges in a more holistic way.
Wonderful. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, my love. Okay, so can you explain your background and your training to getting to where you are today? Obviously, we've discussed dance and psychology of movement, so your professional path to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I completed a degree in contemporary dance. There was a section of that training that dealt with the psychology of movement, which was really interesting to me anyway, but then became more interesting in a more personal way, which I'll explain in a moment. I actually wanted to move on to do dance movement psychotherapy, but after 3 years of uni, the only place in the UK that was doing it at the time was the same university. And I was like, no, I need to leave. I've been here too long. And so I went through a sort of slightly different pathway. But I have a master's in psychology, and I have completed professional development trainings around the nervous system, polyvagal theory, specifically interoception, and how to use all of this information in a therapeutic setting, like why it's important, how we can access it. Yeah, so those are the areas that I have professional training in. So shall I tell you about the personal route in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so just before I was it just before or just as I started uni, I had a little part-time job, and yeah, it was crazy. There was a person that came into my workplace, and he was a bit mental, and he hit me, and he assaulted me at work out of the blue. And I had essentially gone into a freeze response. And at this time, I had absolutely no language or information around what was going on for me physically. I just kind of experienced it as this was a horrible thing that happened. And now I feel shit. And I felt really shit for a really long time. And it just seemed to get worse. And I found myself not being able to be in lecture halls without sitting right by the door. I would feel really terrible and have quite intense panic attacks if I was sitting far away. And it was in like the halls didn't, the windows didn't open properly. You know, those ones where they only go a little bit out, like safety or whatever. So if I found myself sitting in a part of the room where I was close to the window, but I couldn't open it and it was too far away from the door, I would just have this just huge physical reaction to my environment. And yeah, it was awful. I couldn't leave the house without feeling really like on edge. I couldn't go to that job anymore. I just absolutely couldn't go back in there. And so, yeah, this was tricky. And I'd obviously spoken to my GP, who was lovely and put me in touch with a therapist through the NHS, which wasn't helpful at the time. It wasn't helpful at all to me personally. And so intuitively, I knew something was going on with my body. I knew that if I could kind of get underneath the reaction, that I could get in front of it somehow and control it better. I had been practicing a lot of yoga since sort of my teens, and so I was really leaning on my practice in a different way. I was using pranayama differently. I noticed obviously my breath was very different when I was having a panic attack, which was interesting to me. And so I ended up reading everything I could about the nervous system, and it was like a bit of a light bulb moment. And that for me, like having that information was so empowering, because I suddenly understood more about what was actually happening to my body. And having this future orientation with my thoughts was really kind of like driving my response. You know, this idea of, oh no, what if something happens and I can't get out? What if I go into this class and I have a panic attack and someone notices, and then all of a sudden I start to not be able to breathe properly? So I know that there was something about me that was making it kind of worse. So yeah, I read everything I could. I understood it a bit more. And I actually wrote my dissertation on how yoga and breathwork can be really, really helpful for people who have sort of low-grade generalized anxiety. Wow. And yeah, it was amazing to really dive into that.
Yeah, amazing. Just as a little tangent, could you just explain how that freeze moment impacts? Because we talk a lot about fight or flight, but that freeze is kind of the lesser known. So can you just explain a little bit and about the impact of that freeze moment for you, and how that freeze work can create, you know, cycles of trauma or difficulty for us, just as a little tangent?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. So I think firstly I want to say that the fight flight response that comes out of that sympathetic mobilization is your nervous system under stress. It's like, are we moving away or towards? But you can have a sympathetic mobilized response to something really amazing as well. So when you find something really inspiring, or you want to go for a run or do something that you really love, that's mobilized energy, but it's like in safety. It's not under threat. And so the freeze response, that comes up when you're when the sympathetic response has been unhelpful. So if you're in a situation, I'll speak to my own experience. So in that moment, it wasn't possible for me to fight this person off. It wasn't possible for me to run away because I was at work. And so that for me was loud. It was like, oh God, I can't even leave. And this has happened. And actually I was sort of standing behind like a gym reception. There wasn't a lot of space either. So if you can't run away, if you can't fight the thing off, then the next response that's available to you is freezing. And so that's what happened to me in my situation. Underneath that is an absolute collapse. So passing out, not conscious anymore, like really that's the life threat situation though. So yeah, your body kind of just takes over and makes the decision for you in a moment where something is happening and it's right in front of you. But the freeze response, if you, like me, I didn't have the kind of experience of my body that I needed to be able to let that fully move through me and away so that I could recover and regulate and move on with my life. So instead, what had happened is that freeze response got a bit trapped, if you will. It's like it sort of stays with you. And then as you carry on about your days, things around you that feel slightly familiar to the thing that has happened, it kind of initiates that pattern of response again.
And that's the thing that gets stuck, right? In some kind of way. I mean, if we look at animals in the wild, then after their freeze, they do a kind of big shake.
Yeah. Gets rid of the
what gets it gets trapped. And then through this somatic work, and you mentioned as well that for you personally, after this event, the type of therapy that you received, you said wasn't helpful at the time.
Yeah.
But this somatic work of moving things through the body just allows things to start easing.
Yeah. To like it's almost like shaking it off. And I love what you said about animals. I use Mumbles as an example quite a lot because he's amazing. But Mumbles is my dog.
Just for context.
But so when I walk him, he's a little bit territorial of me. And if a big dog or somebody comes over that he doesn't know, he has this stance that says, I'm ready to attack you if you cross a line. He's never done it, but he just gets defensive. So the defenses come on, his hackles come up, he's ready. And then as soon as the person goes away or the dog is put on a lead and leaves, he looks around and he does a big shake. He literally shakes it off. And sometimes he'll do a yawn as well. And it happens that fluidly. Animals do this so elegantly. Like they have a response. And in this case, Mumbles is like on guard. He's ready. He's about to move towards the threat. And then the threat goes away. He doesn't need that energy anymore. And he shakes it off and it's done. Yeah. So elegant. Like we can learn so much from animals just watching them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fascinating. And, you know, I'd like to speak to you about this, of how somatic work can therefore help with people, you know, with triggers or anxiety and depression. And we can go into that. But just to ask you now, so how can somatic therapy work alongside clinical or conventional therapies to facilitate or enhance healing and recovery?
So, yeah, firstly, I love that. I think it's really important to have like a range of different practices, therapies at your disposal, because, you know, we are complicated systems. And I feel like so talk therapy, psychotherapy, CBT, things like this are really addressing thoughts, the kind of cognitive aspect of problems, challenges, difficult experiences, and that can be really, really helpful. Somatic practices. So somatic therapy is a really big umbrella for lots and lots of things, but working somatically within a therapeutic context gives you access to your felt experience of the problem. And this is important because feelings are embodied. They're not a cognitive experience. They are literally in your body. And so it can be really, really helpful to talk through your problems, and just having somebody listen to you and really hold space for you can sometimes be enough to really let that charge come out. Because we all know, like, well, hopefully all of us knows how it feels to really be seen by another person and heard, and that in itself is very, very healing. But if you're having lots of talk therapy and you're noticing that maybe things aren't moving in the way you want it to, then it can be good to address the felt experience, like really tuning into your felt sense and being curious about what's happening in your body. It gives you a new layer of information about you and your experience. The cognitive piece is a piece, the felt piece is something else, an addition.
Awesome. So in your experience, how can this work serve somebody with deeper trauma? And I'm asking this because, you know, I've come across people who have trauma that they need to work through, who've perhaps been through some kind of abuse or assault, maybe where they've experienced a moment or series of freeze moments, like you expressed yourself, or some kind of deeper trauma pattern. And they feel as well that the approach of conventional therapy or something hasn't worked for them, and they've taken that on to be like, oh, I can't necessarily be helped, or I'm going to be stuck in this for a long time, or nothing's working, this is just the way that things are. So I'm just interested in how this work can support somebody with a deeper trauma if they haven't yet explored the area of somatics.
Yeah, I love this question. It's an important question as well, because lots of people who've been through some particularly crunchy experiences might have lots of shame around, why didn't I do this? I wish I'd done that. Why, and all this kind of talk, which can be, you know, really perpetuate the problem. And so to answer your question, knowledge is power. And I think that if you can explore something else and understand it, get some insights, it might help you see things differently, experience it differently. And I think that, you know, when you understand the science, the biology, the mechanisms that are actually at work in your body, the real things that are activating in service of survival, when you can understand those things, it's like, oh, okay, well, my body was taking care of me. This happened because I'm a human animal, and these predictable pathways of responses are in me and available to me. And yeah, they're part of my makeup. Like, I think having an understanding, a basic understanding of these things is like, okay, maybe the shame can just reduce a little bit now. Maybe I don't need to feel this shame. I didn't do anything wrong. There is no like wrong thing that I did. My body reacted. This is a biological response. Yeah, so I think being able to understand a bit about the body and being able to feel into different states that your nervous system shifts through, having a conscious experience of that over time can just help underpin your whole experience. So you're really feeling it, you're really kind of navigating through the world as a whole human animal, not just thinking about, oh, okay, I'm going to go and do this and I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to go to work and this is how I feel about this person. Like, you start to experience it through the felt sense. Yeah, which is wordless. It's a wordless experience. It's a really different kind of way to receive impact.
Because trauma as well, it's something that it happens to the body as well, right? It happens to the body, it happens to the nervous system. So being able to explore that, you know, ever so, you know, carefully, and obviously with specialized support, that surely can have such a positive or powerful effect for some people, rather than just approaching it from a purely cognitive conventional method, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. This is really subjective as well, because something that is very traumatic for one person might not be for the other, and so really subjective experience. And anything can be traumatic. If your system is overwhelmed and cannot deal with it, then you're going to have a response to that, and you become traumatized when you're not able to regulate. You can't return to this sort of homeostasis afterwards. Your body has been kind of shocked into a state that's really hard to move out of, and that autonomic experience, that autonomic story, if you will, is so strong and so kind of on the surface. It's a bit like somebody who's quite heavily traumatized, or they're a bit like a kind of surveillance system that's really, really on, and it's hard for them to switch that off, to regulate, to come into connection, because they've had this experience where now everything feels unsafe. They can't kind of move through it and come back out. That's kind of really oversimplified, but essentially, anything can overwhelm the system. And if it's hard to regulate and move forward out of that, then you're kind of in this state where you're on all the time.
Yeah, I suppose that all of that is just an invitation for someone who's listening, who's gone through something that has been challenging or traumatic. It's an invitation to maybe just start exploring this as a new arena for
Absolutely.
healing and recovery.
So I do just want to say that it's really important to sort of tread carefully with somatic work if you do have quite a strong history of very, very difficult experiences, because if your body is not somewhere that you feel safe in, then that needs to be addressed first. And so going straight into felt sense practices and working with the felt experience of big emotions can be really too much and often re-traumatizing for people. So it's very important to tread carefully, find someone that you resonate with, that you feel safe with. Feeling safe is literally the top of the agenda. You've got to be able to connect to safety.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that in. So just moving away now from people who've experienced deeper trauma and talking about more of a kind of generalized approach using this work. So I hear a lot of people within my realms of work saying that they feel quite disconnected from their body. And that seems to be quite a kind of common thread that people experience. What would you say it is about our lives today that creates this disconnection for many people?
Well, I think a lot of us have, everyone's got these really busy lifestyles, not just work and things like that, but, people that might have, I don't know, aging parents, pets, children to look after. There's lots of responsibilities that we have, and the pace is, rapid. Things need to be done soon. This sense of urgency is just, prevails. And, that kind of go pace that is so unrelenting over time, that's going to impact you. We're human animals that aren't designed to be on all of the time. And so I think there's a lifestyle piece here that's important, is significant, at least to this kind of being disconnected, this feeling of being disconnected to your body. And I think that when you are in a place where you're doing loads, working loads, and it's really, really busy all the time, you begin to override cues that your body is giving you until those cues are so big that you can't ignore them anymore. It's like, those people that seem to just never stop, and then all of a sudden they get really, really ill with like the flu or something, and it's like, well, you need to rest. Because that probably started as something that was just like maybe a sniffly cold, and just taking 2 days to let your body recover would have been enough. But so what I'm trying to say is, I think that there's this chronic overriding that we're doing of cues that our body is giving us to say, hey, I need this. Hey, I need this. Hey, you need to sleep. Can I have a glass of water? Like all of these really basic things that are being ignored because it's, other things are being prioritized. And it's a tricky one to navigate, because things need to get done, don't they? But that disconnected feeling is a problem.
Yeah. And for the people that feel, oh, I just need to get this done, and I know that we're all guilty of that sometimes. I myself have overridden things, being like, I'll deal with the body stuff like later. I just need to get my to-do list done, etc. For somebody that is in that pattern or in that paradigm of like, oh, I'll attend to this stuff later, I just need to get all of the stuff done. Why should we take the time to tune in with our bodies? And you just mentioned a lot of these things are cues for things that our body actually needs. So, I mean, that should be an incentive enough in itself. However, for somebody that is very much in their pattern around just overriding things, why should we take the time to tune in with our bodies? What is the benefit of doing this work, tuning back in?
Okay, so why do this work? Well, working with the felt sense, I think I said this bit earlier, but when you're noticing, it's like a practice of noticing moment to moment, what's happening, what does my body say about this, what's real, what's true, what's my cognitive story about this present moment. Sending that awareness into your body and into your experience that isn't cognitive, so noticing anything else that's not cognitive, gives you a moment of presence, if you will. And I know that word has lots of kind of sort of philosophical connotations, but it gives you a moment to pause and to figure out what's happening, to listen to your body. So in a kind of, let's say someone might be triggered, not massively, but they're a little bit on edge, they're a bit ticked off, and let's say they have a story about their boss, like, you know, this person is really pissing me off and I'm feeling some stress over here and blah 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 blah. Okay, that would be a moment to pause, notice what kind of state you're in, like what does my body feel like right now, you know, and that answer might be, well, I feel mobilized, feel quite connected to my legs, my thighs might feel very contracted. Okay, well, I have some energy, I need to move this out. How can I move this out? And sometimes it's not available for us to be like, I'm leaving this meeting, so I have to run around the block because I'm really stressed out. Sometimes we can't do that. So it would be like, okay, what else could I do to help move this energy out of me, to make space to come back into connection? And so like removing that charge will shift your physiology, and you can do that in a number of different ways. It's really kind of personal, but I think we'll probably touch on that in a moment. But being able to check in with your body, recognize that you've been impacted, like you are having an experience, it gives you ownership over the experience. Instead of that person made me feel like this and I'm so annoyed and feel kind of disgruntled, you're saying, okay, well, I've been impacted, this is how my body feels right now, what do I need, how can I support myself through this? So it gives you a moment to just pause, gives you some space between the autonomic story and the cognitive story, so that you can be like, okay, how can I readjust this? What's true right now? And what can I do that better serves, that will help me stay in alignment with myself?
And you mentioned collaboration and connection as well. So do you want to speak a little to that, how this work impacts in those areas?
Oh yeah, for sure. So, oh my goodness, like, oh wow. I mean, have you ever just like met a stranger or something, and I do this quite a lot with Mumbles when I take him for a walk. You get chatting to dog walkers and stuff, and sometimes people are really friendly and they want to chat, and you know, you have this moment of like, well, I'll speak for myself. I have moments like this often where I'm like, oh, that was so nice. Like, I really, really enjoyed that moment. Like, I might never see them again, or I don't even know what their name is, but this is so lovely. And I walk away and I'm like, oh, I am ready to start my day. So I think I just want to give a little bit more context to that. So like, I'm not a morning person at all. Don't speak to me until I've had like one second cup of coffee. And that's just how I am. And so I can be a bit kind of like in the mornings. And I know that about myself. And after I got Mumbles and I started going up early in the morning for walks and stuff, I used to hate it because I was like, oh God, this is annoying. But actually, when I started to talk to people like other dog walkers and stuff, it made like I had a different impact. I was like, ooh, this feels nice, like humans. And you know, we'd have a conversation and I would suddenly feel really grounded. So I would walk differently. I would feel a bit lighter and just a bit more like attuned, ready somehow, like this up and over feeling in my whole body. And it just changed like the way I did mornings basically. But yeah, when you kind of feel into your felt sense and you are checking out all of these experiences, it's important to remember that you have this whole spectrum of feeling, and that kind of connection, collaboration, preference, pleasure is all on is also available to you. So it's not just about feeling around into the crunchy stuff, it's feeling around into your felt sense when you have these moments of feeling really connected, even if it's just like a stranger, or it can be connected to anything. Feeling into the felt sense when you also feel amazing is part of the work.
I love that. Kind of what what I'm hearing as the last bit of what you were saying is, when we can when we can experience our felt sense, it really enhances our sense of being here, being present in any day interaction, which really allows us to feel more alive, would you say? For just your average person, doing this work really enhances our whole sense of being here. Like, it feels to me, it's like gives us more vitality in our day-to-day, would you say?
Absolutely. Like, I think that's quite important to say, really, because when you start to sort of spontaneously connect with your felt lived experience, you kind of feel everything a little bit more. So it really gives you access to the whole like 3D experience of emotion, which is when things feel great, is really, really good. And so having spontaneous connection after sort of working into your felt sense for some time, it does kind of open up this gate of really feeling things fully. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So, I mean, maybe that is a segue into speaking about how to do this, into how to do this work, because you mentioned pleasure as well within your work. And for somebody who's wanting to get more connected to their body, to their felt experience, what does that look like? What's the how behind some of this work?
What's the how? How do we get in? Let me in. Okay, yeah. So what I want to say about that first is that it is subtle. This is a subtle practice. When there's a lot of charge in the system, it's less subtle. You're very suddenly aware of those feelings, like when you're very excited or angry, you will feel that in your body. But when you're kind of neutral and starting to search around in this, it is subtle. And there's plenty of us that are, maybe addicted is the wrong word, but very, very attuned to big sensations, really big stuff in the body. Like, I can only notice if it's really like massive, and I can absolutely locate it. So there's this kind of orientation towards things that are like really big feelings. And so, yeah, so this work is subtle. So you kind of have to increase your awareness for the whole spectrum of feeling. And so it can look different for everyone. Some people sit like a meditation, if you will. They'll sit really still. They will manipulate their breathing and see how their breathing impacts the rest of their system, which can be really lovely. You can literally go for a walk and tune in to how your feet are touching the ground. Like, which part of your foot is on the floor? Like, is there a part of the sole of your foot that isn't quite touching the floor? Like, really tuning in to how your body is moving through the world. Also things like squeezing your arms so slowly, and being really curious about what that feels like inside the body. So as I'm doing that, notice my breath changing. So and also I worked out every day this week, and my biceps. So these are quite big ways, like kind of you're going into sort of starting with the muscles, if you will. Like, how do my muscles feel when I touch them? How do my feet feel when I walk through the space? How do I feel when the sun is on my face? What do I like about that? So really kind of big, obvious things like impacting the body. How do I feel this? You're not looking for anything. You are just noticing. So where this gets interesting and a bit more internal, so less kind of big global feelings, more internal and visceral, is when you're with other people. So noticing how you feel, not how you think you feel, like the labels of, well, I feel happy, sad, I feel a bit stressed out, I feel this, not that, like how you feel in sensation, like your level of sensation, checking in with how that is when you are with someone else. And then checking in again when you're with a new person. How does your body show up when you're at work? How does it feel when you step in through the front door? Like, it's subtle shifts. But as you start to notice, you will feel them shift even more. Like it will be more in your awareness. It takes a bit of practice.
I love that, because what you're giving there is things that we can be doing anytime, all the time, anytime. And because I feel within the area of, wellness and healing, it can be I need to get myself to this class, or I need to do this, or this big morning practice, or this. And I sometimes feel like it's kind of overwhelms us to be like, oh, now I need to add this into my practices. But actually what you're talking about is just anchoring ourselves in the here and now, which we can do any moment, and anybody can do that.
I'm really pleased you said that, actually, because something happened to me the other day and I was like, oh, this is such a great moment. And I really want to talk about that. So yeah, absolutely what you said. Like, this is about dropping in at any time, and you have a felt sense. It's in you and you have access to it. It might not feel like it straight away, but it's available. And so this is something you can kind of play around with at will, And so I was in the post office. I was queuing. I was rushing because I am perpetually late for everything at the moment. It's very annoying. And there was a lady in front of me who had quite a few things that she needed to post. And wow, the sense of urgency in my entire experience was huge. And I was like, okay. What the hell is going on here? I noticed my cognitive story was, oh my God, I wish this woman would hurry up because she is making me late. Right. And I was like, oh, Emma, no. And I was like, okay, so what's actually happening? And I noticed all of my weight was in my toes. My thighs really kind of activated. My forehead was furrowed a little bit, lots of tension in my face, real forward motion. I was heavily aware of the front of my body. And I was like ready to run out that shop as soon as I'd done what I needed to. Like, I was literally poised. And I was like, okay, this is an unnecessary response. So what do I need right now? Like, firstly, she is not making me late. I made myself late because my time management this morning was horrendous. So take ownership. So I sort of just quickly fixed that cognitive piece out the way. And then I addressed what was happening in my body. So it's like, okay, what can I do? So I shifted the weight back into my heels, forward, back, toes, heels. And then I sort of stepped side to side, just sort of a gentle sort of swaying. And then I had a big yawn and I moved my jaw around and I let my tongue relax and I took my hair out and then tied it back up in a bun again, which was entirely just to move a little bit, let some of that move away. And then it was like, okay, fine, I'm going to be late for my class, but this is not an actual problem. So just come back to baseline. And when you start to work with the felt sense, like, you'll notice things like this often, and then you'll go, oh, I'm doing it again. Okay, what do I need? And regulate. Okay, cool. Moving on. Like, you'll do it quite rapidly, a bit like we were saying about how elegantly animals just move through these cycles. So yeah, it's like in the moment stuff. And I want to add one last piece. Often you'll notice the bad stuff first. So like that example I just gave about being late and I had all this urgency and I was blaming the woman in front of me and all of that stuff, which was entirely silly. But it's good to drop into your felt sense when something really lovely is happening as well, when you feel amazing. So I know we talked a bit about connection and stuff just now, but really dropping into your lived embodied experience of, wow, I'm really having a great day, or I'm having the time of my life, or I really enjoyed meeting this person and I just feel alive, So it's important to drop into that as well.
Yeah, beautiful. So I guess that's a great segue into talking about the nervous system, because that's something that comes up within your work a lot. And For somebody that's actually not really aware of having a nervous system, obviously we all do, but it's not in everybody's vocabulary, it's not in everyone's vocabulary. What exactly is the nervous system, and how do we know when our nervous system is regulated or dysregulated?
Cool. Well, so that's a huge topic, and so I the framework I'm using is polyvagal theory. So Dr. Stephen Porges is sort of the founder of this theory, and so where to begin really? It's such a huge piece, but the autonomic nervous system is made up of your sympathetic and parasympathetic branches, right? And polyvagal theory brings in this idea that your parasympathetic is split into two other branches. So you've got your ventral vagal complex and your dorsal vagal complex. The ventral space is neural complex that runs across the face, the neck, also the heart, regulates the heart. And the dorsal complex is this is the piece that's responsible for freeze, collapse, and those more kind of primitive responses. We share that piece with other species as well. And so there is like a hierarchy of responses that your nervous system has, which I think we touched on a little bit. But your body wants to be in connection. So you want to be in this ventral vagal space, which is feeling connected, being able to collaborate, having access to vitality, creativity, playfulness, all of that stuff lives up in that kind of neural circuit. We regulate all the time. Our body is responding to things all of the time in our environment, all over the place. And so we aren't just in regulation the whole time. Like that's not a thing. The nervous system is designed to be flexible so that we can shift through these states. Being activated and triggered is like your body kind of preparing for something to do. So it's like, okay, I'm under stress, I'm going to run away, or I'm going to fight the thing. Like that is a response that is kind of would be dysregulating for your system. But when the threat goes away, you regulate and you come back to homeostasis. I think it's hard for people to notice sometimes when they are dysregulated, because a lot of people spend a lot of time under stress, whether that's with work or personal life or anything at all. And so sometimes feeling regulated and being truly in this kind of homeostatic state can feel completely alien. And it's like, oh, I should be doing something. It's hard for me to sit still and do nothing. I think if a person knows what it feels like for them to be truly at rest or feeling creative and being able to have access to all of those things like joy, vitality, and things like that, if it's easy for them to connect to that, then they're probably in a place where they've got quite a flexible nervous system, and that's good. But if you find that you haven't felt joyful in a really long time, or you can't remember the last time you felt creative, or it's not easy for you to access playful, silly energy, then it might be that you're spending quite a lot of time feeling dysregulated.
What would be the tips for helping us to regulate our nervous systems or maintaining a balanced nervous system? Tips and tools for re-establishing some nervous system regulation.
So firstly, I think a lot of people know that taking deep breaths helps you relax. So there's a time and a place, right, for all of these things. And something that can feel like a resource might really be helpful in one state, but absolutely not what you need in another. For example, someone who is very angry, like they are full of rage right now, and someone goes up to them and says, calm down, take a deep breath. Like, not helpful at all. You know, that's not what that person needs. But if you are feeling a bit anxious or a bit kind of like you need to take the edge off the activation that's in your system, taking a big breath with really long exhales, like longer than the inhale. You're taking a few of those. You've got to drop them in your system like a little pattern. Drop them in, drop them in, drop them in. Let that exhale get really long. Let it get juicy. Let it move away from you and just fall into that metronome. So physiologically, when you take this long exhale, there's a bit of compression in your in your abdomen. You're moving your diaphragm differently, and it helps stimulate that the vagus nerve in a different way, and it just helps. It's like a sign to your body, oh, it's time to relax now. Yeah. So sometimes we might ask someone for something like, can you please make me a coffee? That's a request. And then that person's going to make you a coffee. This breath, this long, deep breath is like a request to say, hey, we need to chill out, body. Like, just drop the anxiety a little bit. It's like a request. Yeah. So that's one thing. I know that's quite common and lots of people might know about that one already. There's another, so there's a sound, VU, VU, similar to that lovely sound that we might hear in a yoga class, but it's VU, VU, like this. And so what you do is you take a deep breath and then you make the sound VU on the exhale. So I'll demonstrate it for you. But what's important is that you kind of have this really low register, as low as possible, as comfortable as possible. You don't have to like strain your vocal cords or anything, but having this deep resonance influences your vagus nerve. So you're really using what you have at your disposal to influence your biology. So, so you take a breath in, let's VU together, and out through the mouth and VU. Let the air flood in, and you can do a few of those. And you're just dropping something in and seeing how it feels. So just by way of example, what I'm noticing right now is that I have this cool sensation around my eye, kind of around the edge of my eye, which feels quite nice. Not so much my eye, more around my temple. And I feel quite aware of the backs of my legs. I'm standing at the moment. Feel quite grounded. So yeah, it's like you do something and then you listen to the response. Again, it's subtle. You're looking for preference. Did I like that? Do I want more? Do I need more? Let me try again. It's like you're making little requests, dropping something in.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for those tools. That's awesome. I'm going to start VUing. I've forgotten about that from your workshop, so I'm going to start doing that again.
Yeah, it's fun. It always gets an interesting response, especially in workshops when there's a few bodies around, because you know lots of us feel quite silly making noise and using our voice like that, especially when we were sort of making that a lot louder, like opening our mouths and moving around on the floor. But yeah, it can be a really effective way to discharge some energy, and it can be a really effective way of charging you up as well. Like just like making sound on a big yawn, like oh, you know, that can be enough.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so speaking now a little bit to how this can support people with anxiety or depression, I know that this is a big area within your work. So could you speak a little bit to that piece?
Yeah, definitely. So anxiety and depression are really kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, because with depression we have like this lethargy, not a lot of energy, feeling of helplessness, sort of very small, and not that the problem is small, but this idea of kind of being, you know, it's this energy that's very kind of, I can't do this, really kind of in the ground. And then anxiety feels a bit more frenetic, a bit more kind of like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. Like it's very kind of active in the body in a different way. And so things that might be helpful for anxiety might not be helpful for people that are really struggling with depression. And so it's about finding what works for the person. So typically with anxiety, certainly from my experience and what I've learned working with my clients, is like there's this held feeling in the body. So I remember I had a discovery call the first time I met one of my clients. Her whole torso didn't really move, and there was lots of kind of moving around with her hands, and she would make she'd have like little sips of air. I'd notice when there was a sort of swell of emotion and maybe some tears need to just come out for a moment, and then she would do this and kind of lift her chin, like literally like she was in a pool trying to breathe air. And when we're in session, my job is to be curious about what's happening for them in that moment, because what I could see was that, okay, something's happening here and it looks like she's overriding some things. And so I have people pause and check in with what's happening for them right now. Like, what do you notice about your body? What do you need right now? Well, I feel like I need to stand up and actually kind of bend, like maybe move differently somehow, just to let it move out. And so it's kind of like getting in touch with noticing when you're overriding what your body needs. And there's also a thought piece as well, which is we address the cognitive story that comes with the state that they're in. And actually, before I say any more about that, we established like a safety net. It's like a resource, something that feels really, really good to them, so that when we are exploring things that are tricky, we can pendulate back to something that feels good. So when we're in session, I never encourage people to go fully into something that feels intense, because that can also not be helpful. We don't ever want to flood the system. So yeah, it's a process of like, okay, what's happening right now? Let's be with that for a minute. Does it feel okay to be with that for a minute? What do you notice? Is there something? What does it feel like? Is there a way that you can describe it differently? Maybe in an image. If what you're feeling right now in your body had an image, what would it look like? And it's like just trying to interact with what they're feeling and the energy of their experience differently. Like, how can we move this charge out? What is your body saying about it? And then I think with the depression piece, it's quite different, because it's like, okay, this low mood situation is quite heavy. There's not a lot of drive that comes out of it. So what does it feel like? What do you feel like is available to you right now that might just shift the gear slightly? Because it can take a few days to cycle up out of something that feels quite depressing, like very low moods, can really impact you for like days. And so it can take a while to cycle back up. So exploring together what feels available to that individual is really kind of the angle that we go for. The resource has to come out of them. So it's like having them explore what's available. So does it feel like you can stand up? No. Okay. So if you're lying down, can you move your legs? Does it feel okay to move your legs? Does that feel good? Like, how can we generate a bit more charge? Does that feel helpful? It's like a really kind of gentle process. None of this is like, let's try this and just, let's do some sun salutations and that will help you feel better. It's like, no, slow and steady. What feels available? What feels safe? How can we kind of bring that feeling of safety back into your body?
Awesome. Thank you, lovely. I'll just ask one more question to you, which is around this pleasure piece that you wanted to bring in as well, which I'm sure follows on naturally from also, your work talking about supporting people with anxiety and depression. So how can pleasure help us in the journey back to our bodies?
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. Pleasure. Yeah. So I want to caveat this with the focus on the pleasure spectrum of emotions is really, really important. But at no point is it ever intended to be bypassing or toxic positivity or anything like that. Because some people just do not have access to feeling good. Like, things might have been so terrible for them for so long that they are just like, they're strung out, they are exhausted. The idea of being playful and silly and being connected to vitality is like so far removed and unavailable, and that's okay and very normal for people that have really been through the fire. So in those kinds of cases, it's like, okay, this is what we're dealing with, these are the challenges that we have. is there anything about your experience right now that feels neutral or less bad? Like, we're kind of moving the needle on that kind of dial. They might really have access to the stuff that feels horrible, but over time, let's just start to increase capacity for everything else. Like, let's gently bring it back in. And this is really important, because when we feel safe, when our whole system is experiencing cues of safety and connection, it's your physiology will start to shift. Okay, so there is a change that's happening in your body, and it can take a while for that to integrate, if you will. So someone, like I said, who's really had a rough time and it's been really hard for them and they're not able to connect to all those lovely things, it's going to take some time to kind of re-experience the good stuff, because it's been absent for so long. So we start by just, okay, fine, let's look at the problem, and then let's just see what else there is, really, really gently. And if it's not there, if only the problem is available, that's fine as well. So the importance of including the whole spectrum of your experience, is that if you're only looking at the problem, that's the only thing that's going to be in your field of vision. So moving towards preference, asking yourself, what do I like? What do I like about this situation? What do I like about how I feel right now? Is orientating your awareness to something other than what's just really, really horrendous at that time. So you can do this in the moment, day to day, when you're walking around. And it's good to do, because you want to be able to connect to preference. And that's something that a lot of people really struggle with, because it's like, well, I have to do this and I have to do that, and I've got to fix this thing and I've got to do that. It's like things they have to do. And the idea of doing something just because it feels great, like, I don't know, going for a cycle just because the sun's out and I've got a spare couple of hours. It's like, well, I could do that, or maybe I'll do something more productive, which is so it's a shame. It's a shame, because when you do the things that feel good, you're influencing your physiology. And when your state is happy, that's going to influence your story. Story follows state. So by doing the things that you like, or having experiences that feel good, you're working in service of like holistic health. It serves a purpose. It might not be immediately available, but having that experience of, oh my God, this is so good, it can stay with you for days. And so, yes, we look at the challenges. Yes, we look at the problems. We want to work through them. And in order to do that effectively, we have to also include the other stuff. Let's bring it alongside the problem. I think I really want to drive home that I appreciate it can be so hard for people to connect to those lovely feelings. And I know what it's like when, I've had experience of, my own personal experiences of anxiety and things like that, and just really being in that moment of like, oh my God, this is so awful, I'm so stressed, I don't know if I'm ever going to feel anything else. And then you go and see your friends and they're all like, oh, amazing, let's do this, let's do that, and suddenly they're in a whole spiral that you just can't have access to because you feel so awful. Like, I can appreciate, I get that can happen. And so hearing like, oh, you've got to include things that feel nice, can feel really confronting for some people who just haven't been able to connect to it. And so I really just want to kind of highlight that, and just give a gentle nod to the people who might have really, really suffered and found that tricky.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, lovely. Okay, so we're running out of time. So I just wanted to, see this as an invitation for you to talk a little bit about how to work with you, anything that you have coming up, anything in the pipeline that you want to be able to share with people today.
Yeah, okay, cool. So typically I work on Zoom. Unless you're super local to where I am, then which would be amazing. I much prefer in person. So I do one-to-one sessions, and I also host online and in-person events. They're a little bit sporadic, but we've got some very cool things coming up in the next couple of months. So if you are interested in the felt sense and this kind of work, then hop over to my website and check it out.
I will include all of that information in the show notes. Beautiful. Okay, lovely. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to include or share?
Oh, I just, thanks for having me. And this was so nice. Yeah, it's just lovely, really. So thanks for having me.
It's been awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been amazing having you on. I hope that you enjoyed that episode. I offer this as a gentle invitation for anyone who feels this would be a benefit to them alongside traditional therapies, or to anyone who feels like they're ready for a new layer of healing and aliveness. Emma's contact information is detailed within the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love to hear your thoughts and takeaways. You can contact me directly on Instagram at higherlove_with_Megan. And if you regularly follow this podcast, do take a moment to follow or share so that other people can find it. Until next time, big love.